Welcome to the Principles of Biology 1. The focus of this course is to introduce to you the study of biology, biochemistry of life, cellular function, and molecular biology. If you choose to continue in the spring, we will then delve into evolution, biodiversity, and ecology. Every one of you have decided to take this course because you are interested in going into a career that involves either science, medicine, engineering, and/or technology. Maybe you need this as a prerequisite for a higher level science course, or maybe you really just want to delve into what makes life work. Regardless, I am happy to be your guide in the great science of life. Biology is the study of life. Thus far, Earth is the only known planet to harbor living organisms. Evidence for life goes back as far as 4 billion years, and we're most likely microorganisms, also known as single-celled organisms. Multicelled life has only been around for about 500 million years, and our own species, Homo sapiens, has been in existence for 300,000 years. So let's get started. The science of biology. From molecular reactions such as the storage of carbohydrates in the process of photosynthesis, to expressing genes from DNA, to digestive processes in your gut after eating your favorite meal, to interactions of organisms in an ecosystem, biology encompasses all living things and processes. It is a natural science, much like physics, chemistry, geology, and astronomy. Even amongst these disciplines, there arise many subdisciplines. Just like rock music can be broken down into southern rock, alternative, metal, etc., biology can also be broken down into many subdisciplines. Some include molecular biology, which is the study of DNA, RNA, and how these are expressed. Biochemistry, which is a study of chemical reactions that occur in living things. Evolutionary biology, which is the study of how organisms change over time. And ecology, which is the study of the interactions between organisms and their environment. Literally dozens of types of biology exist and all help us understand this great mystery we call life. But before we get into all of this, I think it's important to define science and in particular biology. But it's also important to understand what is a worldview. Each of us have a worldview, and as the name suggests, it is how we perceive the world around us, physically, emotionally, and also includes our own perceptions on how things are or how they should be. While a worldview allows us to lead our lives and make decisions, it is also a major source of bias, and if you don't recognize it, it can taint your views of reality. A worldview is a good thing, but you must be able to maintain a level of objectivity and question your own biases if you are to find evidence to the questions you have of the world around you. So what is science? While no solid definition exists, I like to sum up science as systematic knowledge of physical or material world through empirical observation and experimentation. In order for something to be scientific, it must be measurable. Can you detect this with your senses, or can you use an instrument that enhances your senses, such as a microscope? If not, can you use a specialized tool to help collect data that falls outside of our own senses? For example, infrared light, radio waves, and viruses. Is it falsifiable? In other words, do you have the ability to disprove the idea you wish to test? Science is in the business of disproving, and not proving. I'll explain more of that later. Are you being objective and not allowing the biases of your worldview get in the way of the evidence you are seeking? And finally, are these ideas repeatable? Meaning, can someone else perform the same study and get similar results? This may not always be possible when it comes to things like astronomy, which relies on cycles that can be decades, if not centuries, between events. It may also be difficult to do when you have a fossil organism with only one known sample. However, patterns begin to emerge, and as long as they are consistent, it becomes more and more scientific. Anything that does not follow these rules is not science. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, it's just not science. Religious, philosophical views, political ideologies, opinions about food and or movies, appreciation for a painting, none of these fall under science, but are necessary to the human experience. So let's talk more about falsifiability. It can be a bit confusing, but the idea was first posed by science philosopher Karl Popper, who used this example called all swans are white. So when Europeans were exploring the world, they noted that all species of swan were white in color. This led them to conclude that all swans were white. However, if we apply the concept of falsifiability, let's see what happens. First of all, can you actually prove that all swans are white? Meaning, can you prove that in all cases, in all parts of the world, in all time frames, that the statement is true? And the answer is no. It's impossible. But can you disprove this statement? Yes. All it takes is one instance of a non-white swan, and you have done so. And that's what makes it easier. And so later on, we found out when the European explorers were in Australia, they found out that black swans did in fact exist. So we were able to disprove the statement that all swans are white in color. Science is in the business of disproving things because it is easier to disprove something than it is to prove. In fact, any good scientist or researcher who performs a study will conclude with near certainty, but never complete certainty, because it is impossible to prove anything. A little bit more on scientific philosophy is deductive versus inductive reasoning, and both types of reasoning are necessary in the process of science. First, deductive reasoning, which has been around since Aristotle, helps to make conclusions based on a couple of premises, in other words, arguments. However, the premises have to be true in order for the conclusion to be true. For example, it snows in winter. February is a month in winter, therefore it snows in February. So both it snows in winter and February is a month in the winter are true statements, and if both of those are true, then your conclusion could also be true. Deductive reasoning is useful for testing a hypothesis, and if the conclusion doesn't meet the premise of your hypothesis, then you just change the hypothesis and try something new. Inductive reasoning is a little bit newer, as it's only 400 years old, and was first posed by Francis Bacon. This is useful for making broad generalizations from a specific set of observations. For example, let's say that you notice it snows every February in Maysville, Kentucky, since keeping climate records. Therefore, it's probably easy to conclude that next February it will likely snow. So your observation is that it snowed every February since you can remember. Therefore, it's most likely going to happen in the next February. Inductive reasoning is useful for making predictions, and it allows for your conclusions to be incorrect based on new evidence. Deductive reasoning can only work if the premises are true. These premises come from the conclusion of experiments. Deductive reasoning is good for making predictions to new scenarios, while inductive reasoning is useful in making conclusions from evidence collected. As such, in this particular diagram, if you notice in your observations that members of all species are not all the same, individuals compete for resources, and species are generally adapted to their environment, you can draw the conclusion that individuals most adapted to their environment are more likely to survive and pass their traits to the next generation. And what's nice about that conclusion is that can then become a hypothesis for something you would like to test. And based on that, you can form a prediction. So if the average temperature in an ecosystem increases due to climate change, individuals better adapted to warmer temperatures will outcompete those that are not. So why does science matter? Well, according to the World Health Organization, 17.1 million lives were saved from the measles vaccine since 2000. It can be convenient. The Pew Research Center found that over 6 billion text messages are sent in the U.S. per day. Oral communication went from written to paper delivery by horses and carrier pigeons, postal services, and now the digital realm. We're now finding new ways to try to gather energy from our surroundings rather than using ancient fossil fuels, which are now being shown to cause increase in greenhouse gases, meaning more climate change. Also, it just helps us understand the important questions of life. Why do we get sick? How do we end up with thumbs? What makes the combustion engine move a vehicle? What in the world am I doing here, and why is there life on planet Earth? All of these are answered due to data collected from experimentation and observation. So let's go over a few terms that I feel like are kind of thrown around a lot in society and aren't used correctly. First of all, facts. Facts are just information based on empirical evidence. They are not absolute and are contingent on more and better data. Examples of facts are: Frankfurt is the capital of Kentucky. COVID-19 is a respiratory virus. A hypothesis is a scientific explanation as to why a particular phenomenon occurs. These are constructed so that you can either experiment or test the hypothesis. The hypothesis is very important as a framework for an experiment or observational study. The scientists who first worked with COVID-19 noticed it was a coronavirus, and since it was similar to SARS virus from the early 2000s, they developed hypotheses on how it was transmitted and how to treat it. And the more we learn about this, we start to understand the virus much better. Theories are a series of facts and/or principles that explain scientific phenomena. In science, we have many theories: plate tectonics, which explain many geological forces on this planet; relativity, which shows the relationships between space and time; germ theory, which explains how microorganisms can spread disease; and evolution, which explains the relatedness of all life on Earth, how it changes over time. Opinions are judgments, viewpoints, or statements that are not conclusive. With more evidence, they can be stronger, but these are not reliable as a source of information. Examples include: pineapple's delicious on pizza; Nintendo is better than other consoles. These are a couple of personal opinions of mine, and whether you agree or disagree doesn't change how I feel about them. These are based on my experiences, upbringing, and worldview. Medical and scientific opinions are always based on current knowledge known. In March 2020, how to prevent transmission of the virus was based on opinions, but more evidence is making these opinions turn into hypotheses, which in turn become facts. Here are a couple of great quotes about facts. John Adams said, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." Then there was a U.S. congressman in the 1920s that said, "Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts." Here's the deal about facts. If you want to change facts, have better evidence. I think it's important to delve into other ways in which humans perceive the world around them that fall outside of science. You see, science is limited to testable, falsifiable, and objective data. Religion helps to answer questions regarding purpose of how to live one's life. The problem is, religion is untestable. It's impossible to prove or disprove using science and can be subjective to personal opinions and culture. Religion is not right or wrong in the eyes of science. Science is just indifferent to this because it does not follow the requirements of science. Sometimes your ethical point of view can help shape the world around you, and it's not science. Ethics is the study of right and wrong. It's not scientific, although it can drive scientific research. Ethics is subjective and often immeasurable. Some common ethical arguments in science today include: should we clone humans? Is stem cell research okay to do? Technology replacing jobs? The ethics of using vaccines and treatments on healthy people? All of these fall under bioethics, which we'll talk later about this semester. Aesthetics is the appreciation of one's surroundings, also considered subjective as it deals with matters of opinion. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This flower, a tiger lily, is a beautiful flower in my eyes, and oftentimes aesthetics is necessary in the preservation and conservation of species, organisms, and lands on this planet. Now, this snake is probably a symbol of fear for many of you. However, this species of snake, a prairie rattlesnake, is a very important pest controller for many farmers in the Midwest. So let's test your knowledge on being able to identify if something is scientific or not. So we'll start with the first one. Pharmaceutical companies started coronavirus just so they can profit off of a vaccine. This is not science. In fact, this is a conspiracy theory. It is impossible to disprove based on the premises provided, and since it's not falsifiable, it's not science. More people become ill in the winter than summer. This is science because illnesses and seasons are measurable. It is possible to collect data and present a trend. Dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago, and central Kentucky used to be at the bottom of the sea, are both science. They're measurable components, concepts. Even though you can't actually be there in person to see these live organisms, there's plenty of clues and evidence left behind. Star and planet positions affect what will happen to you today. Now, what I mean by this is that if a meteor were to hit you, yes, that would obviously be science. What I'm talking about is astrology. And the problem is that you're correlating two things that are completely unrelated. It is difficult to directly find the cause between the two of these because your interpretation of what happens to you today is subjective. Aliens helped many of our ancient civilizations to thrive. It is difficult to disprove this. Also, there's just no repetitive evidence out there that is objective. The Earth is flat. While completely wrong, the statement itself is scientific because the Earth and flat are both measurable, and it is possible to disprove this. Star Wars is the greatest movie of all time. I believe that to be true, but it's not scientific because it is an opinion. Students who wear red during a test will achieve a high test score. As silly as this sounds, that is scientific, because you're trying to find a causation between two objective forms of measurement, color and test score. Whatever the answer is, this follows science. And in the next video, I want to go over the scientific method.